My name is Briar Callahan. I am 34 years old, and for most of my life, my family called me the strong one. That sounds like a compliment until you understand what it really means. It means no one checks whether you are tired. No one asks if you are scared. No one worries about catching you because they have already decided you will survive the fall. When my older sister Mallory turned 18, my parents handed her a $225,000 trust fund. They called it her safety net, her future, her protection from a hard world. 2 years later, on my 18th birthday, I sat at the same kitchen table and watched my father place an empty gray Samsonite suitcase in front of me. Then he gave me one sentence: "The world is your trust fund, Briar." I laughed because I thought any second my mother would smile, Mallory would look up, and someone would say the real gift was hidden somewhere else. Nobody smiled. Nobody looked up. Nobody said anything. That suitcase was the gift. For years, I believed it was the cruelest thing my parents ever gave me. I was wrong. Because by the time I was 34, Mallory's trust fund was gone, her boutique had collapsed, my parents' savings had been drained, and the house on Hawthorne Lane was buried under a reverse mortgage they were too ashamed to tell me about. Then my mother called me for the first time in years, not to say she was sorry, not to ask how I had survived without them. She called because my father had Alzheimer's, and I would soon discover that someone had been using his credit cards while he could barely remember my name. My parents had spent my whole life believing Mallory needed protection and I did not. But when the truth finally came out, the daughter they left with an empty suitcase was the only one who knew how to protect what was left. I did not go back to Dayton for revenge. I went back with bank statements, legal files, and every receipt my family thought no one would ever read. Mallory's 18th birthday looked like something Elaine Callahan had planned for months, because she had. There were white folding tables in the backyard, pastel balloons tied to the deck railing, a sheet cake from the bakery on Far Hills Avenue, and enough relatives to make the house feel smaller than it was. My mother moved through the yard with a pitcher of lemonade and the bright, nervous smile she wore whenever she wanted the world to see us as a happy family. My father, Warren Callahan, stood at the end of the picnic table with a cream envelope in his hand. He was a mechanical engineer then, precise down to the way he folded napkins. His shirts were always tucked in, his oil changes were logged in a notebook, his garage shelves were labeled in block letters. He trusted numbers more than feelings, because numbers did not ask him hard questions. Mallory stood beside him in a blue sundress, her hair curled, her cheeks flushed from attention. She was beautiful in the effortless way that made adults lean toward her. Everyone had always treated her like something breakable and rare. Warren handed her the envelope, and Elaine pressed both hands to her chest before Mallory even opened it. "This is your safety net, sweetheart," my father told her. Mallory looked down at the paper inside, but she did not look surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the amount, not my mother crying, not the way everyone clapped as if Mallory had achieved something by turning 18. I noticed that my sister already knew. I was 16, standing near the back steps with a paper plate in my hand, watching my parents put Mallory at the center of the room. I did not fully understand why something inside me went cold. I told myself it was jealousy, and maybe part of it was, but it was not just the money. It was the way my father's voice softened when he spoke to her. It was the way my mother looked relieved, as if that envelope proved Mallory would be safe from life itself. 2 years later, my 18th birthday came on a quiet Thursday. No balloons, no relatives, no sheet cake, no cream envelope. Dinner was leftover chicken, green beans, and potatoes reheated in the microwave. Mallory had come over from her apartment, still wearing sunglasses on top of her head, though the sun had gone down. My mother kept glancing at the oven clock like she had somewhere else to be. After dinner, my father disappeared into the hallway closet and came back carrying a gray Samsonite suitcase. Hard shell, scuffed corners, one wheel that squeaked when he rolled it over the kitchen tile. He set it in front of my chair. "The world is your trust fund, Briar," he said. I laughed because I thought I was supposed to. It came out sharp and small, more like a cough than a laugh. Nobody joined in. My mother looked down at her folded napkin. Mallory suddenly became fascinated by a green bean on her plate. My father rested one hand on the suitcase handle, as if he had handed me a car, a scholarship, a future. I looked at the suitcase, then at him. "It's empty." "That is the point," he said. "You fill it yourself." The room went still, in the way rooms do when everyone knows something cruel has happened, but no one wants to be the first to name it. I wanted to ask why Mallory needed $225,000 to become an adult, while I needed luggage. I wanted to ask whether strength was something I had earned or a sentence they had assigned me because it made their choices easier. Instead, I pushed back from the table and walked outside. The front porch smelled like cut grass and warm concrete. I sat on the top step, holding the suitcase upright beside me. It looked ridiculous there, gray and empty, like a prop from a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Warren came out after a few minutes. He sat beside me with a tired sound in his knees. He smelled like Old Spice and motor oil, the same smell that clung to his work jackets. "You're upset," he said. "You gave Mallory $225,000. You gave me a suitcase." He looked out at the street, where the neighbor's porch light flickered over the sidewalk. "Mallory is delicate. She needs a cushion under her. You are different. You are more like me. You land on your feet." I gripped the handle until the plastic bit into my palm. Landing on my feet is not the same as being caught. He opened his mouth, then closed it. My father could rebuild an engine, balance a household budget, and calculate how long a water heater had left before it failed, but he had no formula for a daughter asking why she mattered less. Inside, Elaine was rinsing dishes. When I came back in, she dried her hands and gave me the look mothers give when they want the conversation over without having to finish it. "Your father knows what he's doing." "Does he?" "Mallory has always been more sensitive," she said. "You've always been able to handle things." There it was, wrapped like praise and handed to me like proof. I could handle things, so I did not need help. I could stay quiet, so I did not need comfort. I could survive less, so less was what I got. Aunt June found me in the hallway before I went upstairs. She was Elaine's younger sister, a retired nurse with tired eyes and a habit of saying the thing everyone else stepped around. She touched my wrist lightly. "This is not right," she said. My throat tightened. Then why is everyone acting like it is? June looked toward the kitchen, where my mother was stacking plates too loudly. "Your mother knows, honey, but it is easier to protect the child who cries than the one who stays quiet." I did not cry in front of her. I had already learned that tears made people uncomfortable when they came from the daughter who was supposed to be strong. That August, I packed the gray suitcase for Ohio State. 3 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts, 1 sweater, a second-hand winter coat, toiletries in a plastic bag, my worn copy of a novel I had read too many times, a folder with my financial aid papers and work-study schedule. Everything I owned that mattered fit inside the thing my parents had given me instead of a future. Warren drove me from Dayton to Columbus on Interstate 70. He talked almost the whole way, but not about leaving home, or college, or whether I was scared. He talked about tire pressure, engine coolant, winter driving, and why I should never let my gas tank get below a quarter full. I knew that was his version of care. Maintenance tips instead of tenderness, instructions instead of pride. When we reached campus, parents were carrying mini fridges and plastic bins up the dorm steps. Mothers were smoothing comforters. Fathers were taking pictures. Someone nearby was crying into her daughter's hair. My father stopped the car at the curb and left the engine running. "You'll do fine, Briar." I looked at him. For one foolish second, I waited for more. "I know." He nodded, satisfied, as if I had confirmed his theory. Then he drove away. I stood on the sidewalk with the gray suitcase in one hand and a cardboard box in the other, watching his taillights disappear into traffic. Around me, families were saying goodbye like it hurt. I did not know what to do with the realization that mine had already practiced letting me go. That night, I slid the gray suitcase under my bed. It fit perfectly in the dark space between the frame and the floor, like it had been designed to live underneath things. I did not call home. I lay on the narrow mattress, listening to girls in the hallway laugh with their parents on speakerphone, and I told myself that if the world was my trust fund, I would collect it one shift, one class, one sleepless night at a time. Years later, when my mother sent me a box of financial papers and a sticky note that said she did not know what to do, I would understand that the suitcase had only been the beginning of a different kind of emptiness. But at 18, all I knew was that the gray suitcase was under my bed, and I was learning how to live like nobody was coming to catch me. Ohio State taught me two things fast. The first was that independence looked better in graduation speeches when it felt at 6 in the morning when you were unlocking the campus library with coffee burning a hole in your stomach. The second was that nobody checks on the girl everyone has agreed is fine. From 2010 to 2014, my life ran on alarms. Library shift before class, lectures until mid-afternoon, coffee shop until closing, tutoring on Saturdays for high school juniors whose parents cared enough to pay someone to explain algebra twice. I had a partial scholarship, but partial meant exactly that. The rest came from work, loans, and the kind of budgeting that made a $9 sandwich feel reckless. I learned which vending machines gave you an extra bag of chips if you hit the side just right. I learned to buy used textbooks with other people's highlighting still inside. I learned that ramen tasted better if you stole hot sauce packets from the student union. Most nights, the gray suitcase stayed under my bed, collecting dust and reminding me that my safety net had wheels. The first week, I waited for someone to call. By Wednesday, I gave up waiting and called home. Elaine answered on the fourth ring, distracted, like the phone had interrupted something more important. "Hi, Mom." "Oh, hold on a second. Mallory wants to tell you about the car." Before I could say anything, my sister was on the line, bright and breathless. "It's glacier white," she said. "The seats heat up in like 30 seconds. Dad says the insurance is ridiculous, but whatever, it's worth it." I sat on my narrow dorm bed with my knees pulled up, staring at a crack in the cinder block wall. "Sounds nice." "You should see the sunroof. It makes the whole car feel expensive." "It is expensive." She laughed like I had made a joke. "Mom says I should drive down and visit you sometime, maybe after I get used to parking it." She talked for 11 minutes, the Audi, the leather, the insurance, the way Warren insisted she learn where the spare tire was. When Elaine came back on, her voice softened just enough to make me hope. "Are you eating enough?" I looked at the cup of noodles on my desk. Before I could answer, she covered the phone and called to Mallory about paperwork. Then she came back. "I have to go, honey. Your sister needs help with the insurance forms." The line clicked dead. I held the phone in my lap and realized I was not jealous of the Audi. I was jealous that Mallory could make a car the center of the family, while I could move into college with one suitcase and become background noise. Mallory's life became a slideshow I did not ask to see. Designer bags lined up on hotel beds, Cancun in January, the Bahamas in June, champagne on a boat, her white sunglasses pushed into her hair, Warren and Elaine smiling beside her like proud investors. One caption read, "Trust fund, baby," and "Not sorry." I deleted the app from my phone during finals week, then reinstalled it 2 days later, like touching a bruise to see if it still hurt. Aunt June called me that winter while I was folding sweaters at the coffee shop between shifts. Her voice was low, careful. "I don't want to upset you." That usually means you're about to. "Mallory has gone through a lot already, honey, more than your mother admits." "How much is a lot?" A pause. "Around 70,000 from what I can tell." I pressed the phone harder to my ear. "In 2 years?" June exhaled. Your father says she's learning independence. Your mother says she's finding herself. I looked down at my shoes, black canvas with a hole starting near the toe. When Mallory spends money, she's finding herself. When I work 3 jobs, I'm independent. June did not argue. That was one of the reasons I loved her. You deserved better, Briar. I had to swallow before I could answer. I know. I kept going because stopping was not an option. I finished Ohio State in 2014 and started at Moritz College of Law that fall. The suitcase followed me from the dorm to a shared apartment with bad heat, then to a smaller place near campus where the kitchen window stuck shut every winter. I never used it for travel. I used it for storage. Old notebooks, winter gloves, a cracked picture frame from graduation. It became less like luggage and more like a witness. Law school did not make me softer. It made me precise. I chose elder law because I kept seeing families break in the same places, not in the big speeches, but in the unsigned papers, the missing directives, the adult children who thought love was a plan. At Keaton and Vale Elder Law, Priya Nandakumar let me sit in on cases that smelled like old paper and bad decisions. The one I never forgot was Mrs. Ruth Halpern, 79, small enough to disappear inside her cardigan. Her son, Evan, had been using access to her accounts to pay his bills, then his car loan, then cash withdrawals he could not explain. He sat across from us in a conference room, sweating through his collar. I was going to pay it back, he said. Priya's pen stopped moving. People always say that after the money is gone. I wrote that sentence down. I did not know then how personal it would become. In 2017, I graduated from law school. I sent invitations to Warren, Elaine, and Mallory 8 weeks early. Real paper, thick envelope, my name printed cleanly across the front because I wanted the day to feel official enough for them to show up. 3 days before commencement, Elaine texted, "Mallory has having a hard week. I need to stay close. You understand." On graduation morning, Mallory sent one word, "Congrats." Aunt June sat in the 3rd row wearing a yellow scarf. Graham Ellis, my boyfriend then, whistled so loudly when I crossed the stage that a family in front of him turned around. 2 seats beside them stayed empty. Afterwards, Graham handed me grocery store flowers and kissed my forehead. "You did it." I looked past him at the crowd of families taking pictures. Yeah, I did. By 2018, I was working full-time at Keaton and Vale. By 2019, Graham and I were married and living in a small house in Clintonville, with creaky floors and tomato plants in the backyard. He was a high school history teacher, steady in a way I did not know people could be steady. He never tried to fix my family. He never told me to call more, forgive faster, or be bigger. He just stayed. The gray suitcase lived in the hall closet. I could have thrown it away by then. I had a real suitcase, a leather work bag, a framed bar admission certificate. But I kept the Samsonite because some objects are not useful. They are evidence. In 2021, Mallory opened Mallory Lane Boutique in the Centerville and Kettering area. Aunt June sent me a picture from the grand opening. White walls, gold racks, blush pink shopping bags, Mallory in a cream blazer holding oversized scissors in front of a ribbon. She used what was left of the trust fund, June told me later, and your parents co-signed a loan. How much? $92,000, Cedar Valley Bank. I closed my eyes. Did they ask anyone to look at the business plan? June gave a dry little laugh. You already know that answer. From the outside, the boutique looked charming. From the numbers June repeated, it looked like a slow leak. The rent was too high, the inventory was too expensive. Mallory spent more on decor and launch photos than payroll planning. She posted about building an empire, while Warren and Elaine quietly covered shortfalls. By the end of 2023, Mallory Lane Boutique was closed. 22 months. That was all it took to turn the last of her trust fund into racks of unsold linen dresses and a loan my parents had signed their names to. Elaine's explanation, according to June, was simple. Mallory just needs one more chance. One more chance had become the family prayer. Months passed. I stayed in Columbus. I built wills for strangers, cleaned up guardianship messes, explained Medicaid rules to families who had waited too long. I helped people prepare for the very emergencies my own parents kept pretending would never reach them. Then Aunt June called on a Sunday evening, and this time her voice had changed. "Briar, I'm worried." I sat down at the kitchen table. Graham looked up from grading papers. "What happened?" "Your father is forgetting things, not just keys, bigger things. He left the stove on. He got confused driving to the hardware store. Elaine says it's stress. And Mallory? Still needs money, still says she's getting back on her feet." June went quiet for a moment. "The house on Hawthorne Lane is not as stable as your mother wants people to think." I stared at the tomato plants outside the window, dark leaves shifting in the evening wind. My phone felt heavy in my hand. "You should call," June said gently. I almost did. I even opened Elaine's contact. Then I remembered every call that had ended with Mallory's crisis, every empty chair, every version of, "You understand." I set the phone face down on the table. I was not done caring. I was just tired of knocking on a door that only opened when someone inside needed rescuing. In Dayton, my parents kept calling Mallory's collapse a rough patch, and piece by piece, without telling me, they began using the safety they had left to keep her from facing the ground. By October of 2025, I had gotten very good at not expecting my mother's phone to ring with my mother's name on it. I was in my office at Keaton and Vale Elder Law, reviewing a guardianship petition when the screen lit up. "Mom." Lena Morales walked in with a stack of files and stopped when she saw my face. "Everything okay?" I stared at the phone until the fourth ring. "I don't know yet." Elaine sounded older than I remembered. She asked about Columbus, about whether the leaves had turned, about whether Graham was still teaching. Every question was too careful, like she had written them down before calling. Then her voice thinned. "Your father has been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's." The office went quiet around me. Not actually quiet. Phones still rang, printers still hummed. Lena was still standing by the door. But for a second, all of it moved far away. "When?" "March." I closed my eyes. Why am I hearing this in October? "We didn't want to worry you." That was Elaine's version of mercy, keeping me outside the room, then calling it protection. I picked up a legal pad because my hands needed something to do. "Does Dad have a durable power of attorney?" "A what?" "Healthcare directive?" "Briar, I don't know." "A will?" "Your father always said we had time." "Who is paying the bills?" A pause. "Mallory has been helping with finances." My pen stopped moving. In my line of work, that sentence did not float gently into a conversation. It landed hard. "Helping how?" "Just helping," Elaine said. "Groceries, prescriptions, the credit cards, things I can't keep straight right now." I asked about the house next. The silence that followed had weight. "We did a reverse mortgage." I sat back. "Hawthorne Lane?" "We had to. The boutique loan, the medical bills, everything just came at once." The house was worth around $315,000. The balance on the reverse mortgage, she told me after I pushed, was about $238,000. The home Warren had spent decades maintaining like a machine was now being eaten from the inside. "Send me everything," I said. There was no letter in the box that arrived 3 days later. Just folders, envelopes, unopened notices, and a yellow sticky note in Elaine's handwriting. "I don't know what to do." Graham cleared the kitchen table without asking. He moved his grading papers to the counter, set down 2 glasses of water, and sat across from me. Want me to stay? Please. I started with the bank statements. The checking account had $412 in it. I stared at the number long enough for Graham to lean forward. That bad? Worse than bad. The emergency savings account had once held $18,000. Now it was zero. Not low, not reduced, empty. The medical bills came next. $46,800. Neurology visits, an MRI, neuropsych testing, medication, a few insurance gaps and coverage mistakes after Warren retired earlier than he should have. Each page had its own little explanation, but together they said the same thing. Nobody had been steering. Then the Cedar Valley Bank notices, $92,000 from Mallory Lane Boutique, with Warren and Elaine's signatures under the word guarantor. Demand letters, past due warnings, formal language that sounded polite until you understood it meant the bank was done being patient. I found the reverse mortgage folder under a stack of pharmacy receipts. Graham watched my face. Say it. They borrowed against the house to keep Mallory from falling. He did not answer. He just reached across the table and covered my hand. The credit card statements were last. At first, I thought Elaine had gotten lost in automatic payments or Warren had forgotten what he bought. Then I looked at the locations. Blue Ash, Cincinnati. Blue Ash again. DoorDash, Zara, Nordstrom Rack, a salon, a wine club, a gym membership. Charges on weekends when Mallory had supposedly driven to Dayton to help with Dad. Graham picked up one page and frowned. Do your parents shop at Zara? I did not answer. I was already checking dates. Elaine confirmed it the next morning. Mallory had been added as an authorized user months earlier, supposedly for groceries, prescriptions, and gas. The first charges fit that story. Pharmacy, Kroger, Shell station off Interstate 75. Then the line bent. Then it broke. I drove to Dayton 2 days later. The house on Hawthorne Lane looked smaller than I remembered, and older than it should have. Paint was peeling near the porch rail, the garage door hung slightly crooked. The lawn was cut in uneven strips like someone had started the job and forgotten what they were doing. Elaine opened the door before I knocked. She hugged me too hard. It was not the hug of a mother who missed her daughter. It was the hug of a woman holding on to the only person in the room who might know where the floor was. Warren sat in the living room watching an old Western with the volume low. His flannel shirt was buttoned wrong at the collar. That detail hurt more than I expected. My father used to notice everything. He looked up when I walked in. Are you the nurse? My throat tightened. No, Dad, it's Briar. He smiled politely. That's a pretty name. My daughter Briar is at Ohio State. For a moment, I was 18 again, standing on a curb in Columbus with a suitcase in my hand. He was stuck there too, in the year he had let me go. I sat with Elaine at the kitchen table, the same table. I spread the papers out in groups, because order was the only thing keeping my voice steady. Mallory didn't just help, Mom. Elaine looked down at the statements. She spent $31,600 in 7 months. Most of it was not for Dad. She was overwhelmed. Dad is a vulnerable adult. Elaine's face crumpled. Please don't report your sister. There it was. Warren's money was gone. Warren's mind was failing, Warren's house was at risk, and Elaine's first tear was still for Mallory. I stepped into the hallway and called Priya Nandakumar. I told her enough to make the shape of the problem clear. You need outside counsel, Priya said. You are his daughter. You can help organize, but you cannot be the only lawyer in the room. I knew that. Hearing it still stung. I called Miriam Fox in Dayton. She agreed to review the documents. Dr. Simone Adler, Warren's neurologist, would need to document his cognitive status and any lucid windows. Tanya Rowe could notarize what was appropriate, but only if Miriam was satisfied the signing was clean. Mallory showed up that afternoon with sunglasses on her head and irritation already in her mouth. "So, Mom told you, we need you to fix the legal stuff." Not hello, not how have you been, just fix it. I asked about the credit cards. Mallory crossed her arms. "I used them for groceries and prescriptions. Someone had to help." "Does your grocery store sell wine subscriptions and salon packages in blue ash?" Color rose in her face. "You don't get to disappear for years and come back acting like a judge." I gathered the statement slowly. "I'm not acting like a judge." "Then what are you acting like?" I looked toward the living room, where Warren had started humming along with a commercial he did not understand. "Like someone finally checking the receipts." Mallory left before sunset, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I sat in my car outside Hawthorne Lane after dark, the heater running, the folder on my lap labeled APS Draft. Inside were the statements, the authorized user record, Warren's diagnosis timeline, notes about his capacity, and every charge Mallory thought nobody would trace. I did not send it that night. Not because Mallory deserved silence, because Warren needed protection before the family exploded. Miriam had to review everything. The cards had to be locked down. Elaine had to stop hiding behind panic and start looking at facts. When Elaine suggested Thanksgiving as a way to make things feel normal, I almost laughed. Nothing about that dinner would be normal. For the first time in years, the truth was going to sit at the same table as the family that had spent a lifetime avoiding it. Thanksgiving morning, Graham drove while I sat in the passenger seat with the folder on my lap. Elaine had called it one normal dinner, but normal was just a tablecloth people pulled over things they did not want to name. Miriam Fox had already reviewed the documents. Dr. Simone Adler had written notes on Warren's cognitive status and the narrow windows when he seemed clearer. Tanya Rowe was not coming for dinner because I refused to turn Thanksgiving into a legal performance, but she was available afterward if Elaine chanced to move forward with anything simple and appropriate. The complicated pieces would wait for Miriam. I was not going there to ambush anyone. I was going there prepared. The house on Hawthorne Lane smelled like turkey, butter, and the cinnamon candle Elaine lit every year. For a second, standing in the entryway, I almost felt 16 again. Then Warren appeared in the living room doorway, wearing a sweater Elaine must have picked out. "Hello, miss," he said kindly. My hand tightened around the folder. "Hi, Dad." He smiled without recognition and wandered back toward the television. Elaine kissed my cheek, too quick and too bright. Mallory was already in the dining room with a glass of wine. Calvin Reese stood beside her, talking to Peter Harper about insurance rates and how nobody understood deductibles until something went wrong. Aunt June hugged me longer than usual. Graham took my coat and gave my shoulder a quiet squeeze. Dinner started with everyone pretending. Elaine passed mashed potatoes. Peter complimented the turkey. Calvin asked Warren if he had watched the Bengals game. Warren nodded, then asked what sport they were talking about. Mallory laughed too loudly and poured more wine. "Funny how you suddenly care about Dad now," she said, not looking at me. Elaine's fork stopped midair. "Mallory, not today." I folded my napkin in my lap. Graham stayed still beside me. "I care about Dad. You care about control. There's a difference." Calvin glanced between us. Elaine pushed the green bean casserole toward Peter. "Who wants more potatoes?" Aunt June did not reach for anything. She just watched Mallory with the tired patience of someone who had seen this performance too many times. For 20 minutes, the table held together by force. Then Warren asked me if I was one of Mallory's friends from school, and something in Mallory's face shifted. Maybe she saw me flinch. Maybe she liked it. She set her glass down hard enough to make the cranberry sauce tremble. "You know what? I'm done. You disappear for years, Mom has to beg you to come home, and now you walk in with that folder like you own this family." "Briar," Elaine whispered. "No," Mallory said. "She's not here to help. She's circling the house like a vulture, waiting to pick through what's left." The room went silent. Warren looked around, frightened by a storm he could feel but not understand. "Who's fighting? I don't like fighting." That hurt more than Mallory's words. My father had not protected me from the quiet cruelty in that house when I was young, but now conflict scared him like a child. I stood slowly and picked up the folder. "This is not a fight between sisters, Mom. This is about Dad's finances." Mallory rolled her eyes. "Here we go." I opened the folder and placed the first stack of papers beside the gravy boat. Credit card statements. The second, authorized user records. The third, Dad's diagnosis timeline and charges by date and location. Mallory's face tightened. I did not raise my voice. "You were added to Dad's card to buy prescriptions, groceries, and gas when you drove up from Blue Ash. That's what I did. Some of it, yes. Pharmacy, Kroger, gas, at first." I turned one statement so everyone at the table could see the highlighted lines. Then came DoorDash to your apartment, Zara, Nordstrom Rack, a salon, a wine club, a gym membership, $31,600 over 7 months, most of it after Dad's diagnosis. Calvin's chair moved back a few inches against the floor. "You told me that card was for your father's medication." Mallory looked at him, then at Elaine. "It got mixed up. I was going to pay it back." The sentence landed exactly where I expected it to. I heard Evan Halpern's voice in my memory, sweating in a conference room saying the same thing after his mother's account was empty. Aunt June shut her eyes for 1 second. Elaine's hand went to her mouth. "She was overwhelmed," Elaine said. "She was helping us." "Mom, you called it helping because admitting the truth would mean admitting you chose wrong." Elaine stared at me like I had slapped her. Mallory stood so fast her chair scraped backward. "Don't you dare act righteous. You left." I stopped chasing people who never looked back. "You don't know what it's been like here." "I know what the statements say." Peter pushed his plate away. Calvin did not touch his wine again. Elaine's voice cracked. "Briar, please, don't report her." Aunt June finally spoke, soft but firm. "Elaine, look at the statements." My mother looked down, really looked, not at Mallory's trembling hands, not at the daughter she had spent a lifetime rescuing, but at the paper, dates, places, amounts, proof that did not care who cried first. I pulled one more document from the folder. "I have an Adult Protective Services report drafted. I have not filed it. Miriam Fox is reviewing everything because Dad needs protection, and this needs to be done correctly." Mallory went pale. "You made a report against me?" "I prepared one. There is a difference. If there is one more unauthorized charge, if you touch Dad's accounts again, it gets filed." Elaine began to cry quietly. "The conditions are simple. Mallory comes off every card and account. She signs a repayment agreement. You stop giving her money without oversight. Every dollar of Dad's care gets documented. Miriam handles the legal process, not me alone." Mallory looked at Warren, but he was staring at the cranberry sauce as if it might explain the room. Then I placed Miriam's planning memo on the table. "There is no magic fix. Medicaid look-back is a risk. The reverse mortgage has to be reviewed. The house is not automatically safe. But if you stop pretending today, there may still be something left to protect." The irony sat there with us. Mallory had been given a trust fund to secure her future. I had been given an empty suitcase. Now I was the only one at that table who knew how to begin protecting what remained of theirs. Elaine reached for the memo with shaking fingers. "What do I do?" "You work with Miriam. You remove Mallory's access. You stop hiding from the numbers." Mallory made a sound between a laugh and a sob, then walked out through the front door onto the porch. Calvin stood a minute later. "I need air." He did not look at Mallory when he passed the window. No one finished dinner. Graham stayed beside me. Aunt June stood near Elaine, while Peter gathered the plates no one wanted. Graham asked if there was pie. Later, I found Mallory on the porch steps, arms wrapped around herself against the cold. For once, she did not start with an accusation. I was scared of being nothing without the money. I sat on the step above her, leaving space between us. Then start becoming someone without taking from Dad. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I did not hug her. I did not forgive her. Understanding how someone broke did not make me responsible for pretending they had not cut anyone on the way down. Inside, Elaine sat at the dining room table with the statements spread in front of her and the planning memo under one hand. For the first time, my mother was not chasing Mallory out the door. She was sitting with the truth, and it was finally heavier than the story she had told herself. By Monday morning, the first thing I did was not call the police, and it was not call Mallory. I called the credit card companies with Elaine beside me and Miriam Fox on speaker. Mallory was removed as an authorized user from every card. Transaction alerts were turned on, daily limits were lowered, new cards were issued and mailed to Elaine's house, not Mallory's apartment in Blue Ash. The APS draft stayed in my file. That was not mercy, it was order. The access had to be cut off first. Miriam needed to review the full paper trail. Warren's care had to be stabilized before I dropped a match into the middle of what was left of my family. Mallory was told in writing that one more unauthorized transaction, one more attempt to touch Warren's accounts, and the report would be filed. For once, nobody called that dramatic. Miriam scheduled the repayment meeting for the next week. Mallory arrived late, wearing no makeup, her hair tied back, holding a designer purse I had seen in one of her old posts. She kept it on her lap like a shield. "The amount we have documented is $31,600, Miriam said. Mallory stared at the table. "I said I was sorry." "Sorry does not create a payment schedule," I answered, "especially when the money came from Dad." Elaine flinched, but she did not defend Mallory. That was new. Small, but new. Mallory signed the repayment agreement. She made an initial payment of $5,000 after selling 2 handbags and a bracelet Elaine had bought her years earlier. The rest would come monthly, based on what she could actually afford from her retail job. No vague promises, no "I will pay it back someday." Dates, amounts, consequences. When she pushed the signed pages back to Miriam, Mallory looked smaller than I remembered. "I don't know how to be this person," she muttered. "Then learn," Elaine said. Mallory's looked up at our mother, stunned. Elaine's hands were trembling, but she kept them flat on the table. No more cards, no more excuses. It was the first time I had ever heard my mother choose accountability before rescue. Cedar Valley Bank came next. I spoke with Rachel Greer, a workout specialist who had clearly heard every family disaster before ours. She did not shame Elaine. She did not magically erase the debt, either. "We can consider a 6-month hardship forbearance. After that, based on income and budget, you may be looking at a payment range between $850 and $1,100 a month." Elaine looked at me across the kitchen table, hope and fear fighting on her face. "Can you make that work?" "I can help build the budget. I cannot pay it for you." She nodded slowly. "I know." I waited for the guilt trip. It never came. Miriam reviewed the reverse mortgage and the house documents. There was no miracle there. Hawthorne Lane was still at risk. The balance did not vanish because we finally told the truth. Medicaid planning was complicated, and the look-back rules meant nobody could pretend a trust would save everything overnight. The best we could do was stop the bleeding, document every decision, and make sure no one else treated Warren's care like a family credit card. That became the new rule. Everything written down, everything reviewed. No more panic disguised as love. Elaine began calling every Thursday evening. At first, I let it go to voicemail, then called back when I was ready. I set the boundaries plainly. We can talk about Dad's medication, bills, appointments, and Miriam's next steps. We are not using these calls to make me comfort you about Mallory." "I understand," Elaine said. "Do you?" A long breath moved through the line. "I'm trying to." She started sending monthly statements. She kept a medication notebook for Warren. She learned online banking, slowly, angrily, with Aunt June sitting beside her the first time. She stopped saying, "Mallory needs us more." I noticed because I had been hearing that sentence in one form or another my entire life. One Thursday, Elaine's voice broke halfway through a call about a neurology appointment. "I told myself you didn't need me because it was easier to admit I didn't show up." I stood in my kitchen in Clintonville, one hand on the counter. "I needed you. You just never checked." She cried quietly. I did not rush to fill the silence. I had spent too many years making other people comfortable with the pain they caused me. Mallory did not become a new person overnight. Calvin stepped back from their relationship after Thanksgiving. She picked up more hours at the store where she worked. Sometimes she sent her payment early. Sometimes Miriam had to remind her. Aunt June did not freeze her out, but she did not soften the truth either. Mallory had lost the role she knew best, the daughter everyone ran to save. Learning to stand without an audience looked ugly at first. So did healing. By January of 2026, I was driving to Dayton more than I wanted and less than Elaine hoped. Graham never told me what I should feel. One night, after I came home exhausted and sat on the bedroom floor still wearing my coat, he lowered himself beside me. "What do you need?" I leaned my head back against the wall. "I don't know." "Then we'll start there." That was Graham. No speech about forgiveness, no demand that I cut them off. Just a hand beside mine on the floor, close enough to take if I wanted it. Warren turned 64 that winter. Elaine made dinner, and I brought carrot cake from a bakery in Columbus because he had always liked carrot cake. Most of the evening, he drifted. He asked Graham twice where he taught. He called Aunt June by their mother's name. He looked at Mallory and smiled without quite knowing why. After dinner, I sat beside him in the living room while an old Western played with the sound off. His hand rested on the arm of the chair, thin now, the nails neatly trimmed because Elaine still did that for him. He turned his head suddenly. "Briar?" I went still. "Yes, Dad?" His eyes were clearer than they had been all night. Not perfect, not the man from before, but present enough to hurt. "You did good, kid." 4 words. That was all. No apology, no explanation for the suitcase, the empty chairs, the years he mistook my silence for strength. Then his gaze slipped back toward the television, and the moment was gone. I held his hand anyway. That sentence did not fix my childhood. It did not make the trust fund fair or the suitcase kind. But some part of me that had been standing on a curb at 18 finally sat down. Back in Clintonville, I opened the hall closet and pulled out the gray Samsonite. Dust had settled along the handle. One wheel still squeaked. Inside, I had kept pieces of the life I built without them. A photo from law school graduation with Aunt June on one side and Graham on the other, a copy of my bar admission, an old Ohio State parking pass, the sticky note Elaine had sent with the box of papers. I don't know what to do. I placed it beside the graduation photo. For years, I thought that suitcase was proof that my parents gave me nothing, but looking at it then, I realized it had become the first container I ever filled myself. Not with their money, not with their approval, with education, work, boundaries, love I chose, and the ability to stand in a room full of people who once underestimated me without raising my voice. My family was not magically healed. Mallory was still paying back what she took. Elaine was still learning how to be a mother without turning one daughter into a crisis and the other into a solution. Warren was still disappearing by inches, and I still did not know whether forgiveness would ever be the right word for what I felt. But I knew this. I was not the backup plan anymore. I was not the empty suitcase on the kitchen table. I was not the daughter who had to prove she deserved to be caught. Justice did not come as a check for $225,000. It came as statements spread across the Thanksgiving table. It came as my mother finally looking at the truth. It came as my sister signing her name beneath what she owed. It came as my father, in one clear moment, seeing me. I closed the suitcase, but I did not slide it back into the dark. I set it on the shelf where I could see it. If you have ever been the strong one in your family, the one everyone assumes can handle anything, I want to know what you would have done. Would you have filed the report on Mallory right away, or given her one chance with strict conditions? Leave a comment, and if this story stayed with you, subscribe for more stories about truth, boundaries, and the kind of justice that arrives quietly but changes everything.